Welcome to the Irish Left Archive podcast. We've had a bit of a break, so this is the first in a new series of interviews for 2025. Before I introduce our guest for this episode, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's been listening over the past 5 years, and also to all of the guests who've given up their time to speak to us. I also want to thank everyone who's donated material to the archive. I imagine most of our listeners are familiar, but if you're not, the podcast is attached to the Irish Left Archive, which is a digital collection of documents and material relating to the Irish Left. You can visit our site at leftarchive.ie. So we've had a huge number of documents donated in the last couple of years. All are very welcome, and we welcome future donations. Thank you to everybody who's sent those in. If you have anything you think might be relevant, you can contact us via the website or email us on contact@leftarchive.ie. We've a number of guests lined up for this year, but we're eager to talk to as many activists as possible, as well as those involved in political and historical research. So any suggestions are always very welcome. We welcome interaction and feedback either on the Left Archive site or on the Cedar Lounge Revolution blog, where archive documents are posted up simultaneously with the archive. I also want to point out the other useful resources online. On our website you'll find the further resources page, and there are some excellent archives out there, including Irish election literature. There's a full archive of the SWP's paper The Socialist that has recently been added, as well as a new site, the Irish Republican Digital Archive, which you'll also find a link to there. So for this episode we talked to Niall McGuirk about the Hope Collective. Hope Collective originated in the early 1980s when Niall started putting on gigs to encourage bands to play in Dublin, and developed into the Hope Collective in 1994. Hope facilitated dozens of bands playing gigs in Ireland, and latterly has produced books recording the history and recollections of the music scene. So we discussed Niall's involvement in playing and organising gigs, creating fanzines, the development of Hope Collective, the D.I.Y philosophy and values underpinning it, and the community that it generated. You can find out more about Hope Collective on their website, hopecollectiveireland.com, where you can also buy their most recent publication, Punks Listen, which is a collection of writings from musicians, writers and others about music that has inspired and influenced them. So thank you to Niall for taking the time to talk to us for this episode, and thank you for listening. Thanks, Niall, for taking the time to talk to us. So before getting into the Hope Collective, maybe you can tell us about your own political awareness and what your sort of first memories of that are.
Yeah, I suppose it's hard without really thinking too much about it. What my first political memories. But if you were to ask me what's a big thing, what's a standout thing, I'd be on about the miners' strike in the UK and the images that you'd see on TV screens. And then there's obviously other political awareness around that time in the 80s, based on watching news pictures or watching events up in Northern Ireland. And from personal perspective, listening to bands and listening to music, I was listening to the Clash because my brothers were listening to the Clash, and kind of paying attention to what they were saying, which I found really, really interesting. And that whole inclusivity. So to me, politics isn't just about one doctrine, whether that's whatever that might be, capitalism, socialism, Marxism, whatever it might be. It's about kind of inclusivity and community. That's kind of where it really stems from for me. Because I remember I was in a band in the 80s, and people would be talking about, are you Marxist, are you thisist, are you thatist? And I'm like, I'm just human, just whatever, and without reading the works of Karl Marx or reading the works of somebody, I'd be like, I don't know, Engels, what's that, because I grew up in Donecarney, on the north side of Dublin, and certainly political books like that, political writings were not, high on the agenda. I read a bit, Sherlock Holmes or something like that. That was my reading, and getting in. But you're mentioning about the politics. Listening to the Clash talking about, and that whole thing of anyone can be in a band. That was the the politics that got me, that inclusivity that went, yeah, yeah, you're responsible for your life, you're responsible for your actions, and you can make those actions whatever you want them to be, and do things from them. And then, I started listening to bands like Flux of Pink Indians, which made me start thinking about a whole lifestyle, and that had yeah, profound effect on me, I think. So activities like, say, the minor strike, and seeing bands then going on tour, like the Red Wedge tour, and seeing Skin Video playing in Dublin when they played in Liberty Hall,
Yeah.
things like that have a very distinct memory for me. I'm not sure chronological order, Angus, if that's the right chronological order, but because I hadn't had too much time to think about the question, but it is that it's as a teenager, kind of going, anyone can do whatever they want to do, but it's important to do something that's the right thing, So, and that's kind of where my politics kind of came from. So the Clash and Flux of Pink Indians are to blame for it all, really.
Did you go to a lot of gigs?
So, yeah, I did when I eventually could get it together to go to a gig. So I didn't. Well, I think the first gig I went to, I remember it very well. The first gig I was at, because I was at a wedding it was my cousin's wedding, and myself and my family went out to it. And when we were there, it was out in Malahide, in the Grand Hotel in Malahide. And when we were there, my brother Gary said, "Oh, I'm going in to see Paranoid Visions. I've had enough of this wedding." And I was like, "Oh, great, can I come?" So we left the wedding, went into the Ivy Rooms on the 42 bus, saw Paranoid Visions, saw all the bedlam that was involved in those gigs in the Ivy Rooms, and then went back to the wedding. Nobody noticed that we were gone or anything. But after that, I was like, this is amazing. Now, I was probably 15 at the time, and that was kind of the thing that went, wow, this world is mad, but there's something infectious, there's something good about it. So really, it was going to see Paranoid Visions whenever they played. And then when I got to an age where I could pass as being 18 and could get into gigs, I was going to places like the Underground. You'd go in Bagot, be going, or the Fox and Pheasant or the Earl Grattan, But I couldn't go really until I was probably 17. I was in a band a couple of years, and we were trying to play places, and that was really difficult. And that was one of the things that still sticks with me now. That when we were eventually started doing gigs under the name of Hope Promotions and then the Hope Collective, the first thing we try and do is make the gigs accessible for people of all ages.
Yeah.
Because I remember being a 15-year-old and going, oh, I can't go, I can't. I won't get into the Ivy Rooms all the time. I was probably lucky that night, or wherever it would be.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, like I don't drink alcohol, and it was like the alcohol industry were trying to decide
who goes in.
Music. There was such a link between alcohol sales and music, because when we were putting gigs on, or when you're going to a gig, you'd have a venue for like maybe 2 or 3 months, and then suddenly, so a bar, nobody would come to it. They would start putting on gigs, like, say, if that was the White Horse, or if it was JJ Smith's, or, well, not JJ Smith's, Charlie's Bar on Angel Street. And then suddenly they go, oh no, we're turning into a disco bar, because we see, they saw that they could get crowds, and suddenly it's not a venue anymore, So the bar there was such a link between, and there still is,
between alcohol and...
Yeah, because we did, and maybe I'm chopping and changing
No,
up
far ahead.
here. But there was one gig I remember. It was Bikini Kill. The band Bikini Kill played Charlie's on Angel Street. So somehow it was like Heineken Music Week, whatever the hell that was. I don't know, because I wouldn't have been involved in any way in Heineken Music. But Charlie's Bar had put on a gig probably the previous night. But we had this gig on Saturday afternoon, Bikini Kill, like. At this stage, when you look, I don't know, like Bikini Kill are fairly well known, and they were a groundbreaking band, and they played with this other band called Biss, who are
the English band,
and Team Dresch which was
kind of Riot Girl, and
so Team Dresch played, but Biss had been on Top of the Pops on the Thursday, and suddenly they were in Charlie's Bar on Angel Street on Saturday afternoon. But when we got into the venue was full of all these banners that said Heineken. Like there were all these
Right.
buntings, Heineken,
Yeah.
and we're like, oh, this isn't happening. We're taking them down. And the manager was looking at me going, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, there's no way we're going to, play an afternoon gig and have Heineken. Like we're paying for the venue, so like it's not going to happen. And he's looking, going, what? Why would you want to advertise Heineken? And he's like, because it's Heineken Music Week. I was going, but it's got nothing to do with this gig. We're taking them down. So, so we took them down. Now the gig was sold out, so like he probably was going, well, okay, this is good. That there's a lot of people coming in.
And he was
But as
still
well,
selling booze at it, I presume.
they had the bar open downstairs,
Ah,
and
okay.
so the venue was upstairs, so they didn't open the bar. That was the way they got round it on a Saturday afternoon.
Gotcha. Okay.
But like I was in a
Okay.
band called Not Our World. We played in Trinity
Ah,
College
yeah.
in whatever 19. It was one of those. I think it was like a Valentine's ball or something like that.
Yeah.
It's being sponsored by Guinness, I think. And so when we got in, there was a Guinness, the same thing, a Guinness banner, and I says, "Well, I'm not playing." You have it like
Fair dues.
and but it was kind of strange because people are going like, "Why wouldn't you?" Like it's only a banner. Like there's Guinness everywhere in Ireland, but it's
Eh,
that kind of link.
yeah.
Not an anti. It's not an anti-alcohol link. It's
Yeah.
not that at all. Yeah,
Anti-corporate, really.
but yeah, just like, well, why should they be running? Like, what's
Yeah.
this got to do with what we're trying to achieve as being in a band or achieve as putting on gigs independently?
Yeah.
Um,
Even today, this is a slight sidebar, but it's like if you go to the Olympia, you can go there. Under 14s can go, or up to four, down to 14, I should say, can go into the Olympia with their
yeah,
parents, accompanied by an adult. But
yeah,
if you go to Vicar Street or the Academy,
yeah,
it's 18s entirely.
yeah,
I don't actually understand that because all of them serve alcohol. So I don't
yeah.
understand what the licensing is there at all.
I don't
And
know.
and it's very prejudicial, in my opinion, against anybody who's saying that. Like that key area, it's what you say there, 15 to 18 is when for a
Mhm.
lot of people their musical definition
Yeah, yeah,
occurs. You
and
know,
that's when they start playing in bands as well.
yeah. So in a sense, like when you were starting to go to gigs, there was an eco culture of venues that you felt you could lock into. And then was it a case of you felt like, okay, I can lock into as a spectator, but maybe take this another step or two forward?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, again, it goes back to listening to the Clash and this
Mm.
whole anyone can be in a band kind of stuff. And then Flux of Pink Indians, their record, they wanted to release a record, so they brought it out themselves.
Yeah.
So I was in a band, and I started a band.
Mm.
We were called Vicarious Living, um,
Right.
which was taken directly from a line in a Flux of Pink Indian song.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, we've done a few rehearsals. We've got Garage Land by The Clash as a cover. We've a few going here. Where are we going to play?
Mm.
And I'd been to a gig in a place called Tommy Dunn's Tavern. The Gorehounds played in Tommy Dunn's Tavern,
Ah.
and went, oh, that was decent. I'll try and get Tommy Dunn's Tavern. So it was just like, I'm in a band. I
Mm.
want to play, so we'll go and
Mm.
get a venue. It
Mm.
wasn't like, oh, we need somebody to put it on. We need
Mm.
some, it just was natural. I didn't even think about it in any broader sense, and just like, it's like
Yeah.
kind of like I'm going outside. I need to put my shoes on, so I go and get my shoes.
Yeah.
It's that kind of, well, why would you wait for someone else to put the gig on for you? And
Mm.
also, when you put it on yourself,
Mm.
well, then you can decide what way you want to do it. So you can decide the door price, and you can decide that there's no banner going up that says Guinness or Seven Up or whatever. Uh,
Yeah.
it wasn't that like I was trying to go, right, here's our manifesto. It was
Mm.
just like, yeah, we're in a band, want to
Mm.
play a gig, so I'll decide maybe the best way to do the gig,
Mm.
and then sought out bands like Paranoid Visions and asked could we play with them, or
Mm.
just with things like that. And there was another band called The Pleasure Cell around that time,
Remember
and
them, yeah.
I used to go and see them all the time.
Yeah.
Got quite friendly with them, and tried to play some gigs. At that stage, I was in a band called Kill Devil Hill. We played with Paranoid Visions a couple of times. So
And what were you playing, just by the way?
bass.
What
I
you
played
had
bass.
bass? Okay,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So really, it was just, yeah, I'm in a band. We want to play a gig. So I saw a gig there. Well, how do you do that? And just ring up the venue,
Right. Did you get any pushback? Like, how old would you have been at this stage?
So I suppose I was 16. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the first gig I played would have been 1984. Yeah. Tommy
Wow.
Dunn's Tavern 16. No, well, yeah, it just seemed that was it was all, the records I was listening to
Mm.
were bands who were doing things themselves.
Mm.
That had kind of progressed. So this was 1984. So it
Yeah.
kind of progressed from, the Clash or the Pistols or the Damned or the
Yeah.
second wave, then like, the O Pairs or the Skids,
Mm.
to bands releasing their own records and going, yeah, if you want to do something, be in control of your own creativity.
In terms of the scene, for want of a better word, that is created in that, would it have been then who was going to the gigs? Was it that everybody in the room was in a band themselves and it was taking that same sort of vibe, or was it a more structured thing? Or I'm just kind of curious about that, what kind of crowds you were getting and stuff,
Yeah, so small, small crowds. Yeah, well, I suppose there was a bit of a like so really there was a Paranoid Visions punk scene, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
they really kind of, they were playing gigs at that time, and there was people who were going to see them. I don't really know. It was just
Hmm.
there wasn't like huge numbers. It wasn't all people in bands. A lot of it was kind of friends and acquaintances. It was a strange time, and it's hard to look like you're talking 40 years now, so it's hard to look back and be completely accurate. I
Yeah.
have my version, my rose tinted glasses of accuracy. Um, so I started writing a fanzine. The first fanzine I did was called "Whose Life Is It Anyway?" named after the film.
Yeah.
I just thought that's a really interesting phrase. So I go to gigs with a bundle of fanzines in a plastic bag, and you'd go up to people and say, "Do you want to buy a fanzine?" So it was a great way to talk to people, and then as you were talking to them, go, "Oh yeah, I'm in a band, by the way. We're playing next week. Come along."
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of how that kind of
Yeah.
I don't know what the word
And
that's how that kind of spread a little bit or whatever, or how you got the word out. So then, and obviously you'd have a poster in a record shop at that stage, or maybe you'd hand out flyers,
yeah.
but it was more that conversational piece going like, yeah, yeah, my band are playing. Do you want to come and see us? And then some of them might buy a fanzine, and some of them might go and see you play then.
And what would be in the fanzine? I mean, like,
Yeah, like the first issue of the fanzine, there was a story about the Ruts because Malcolm Owen died from the Ruts.
right,
Story.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, I wrote a letter to Crass. I asked him some questions. I got a reply probably about 10 months later. So there was an
Right.
interview with Crass in one of them, and then I'd go and see bands and I'd ask could I interview them. So like bands like say the Damned or the Redskins when they played in Dublin, I interviewed them. The
Yeah,
Housemarque when they played in the Olympic Ballroom, I interviewed them. So you'd go up on the day and say, oh, can we interview you? New Model Army.
yeah.
So and then just writing letters to people and exchanging tapes.
Right.
Mm.
So that
And
was a big
how
thing.
big would they like? Would it be like folded sheet, or would you
So it was
say?
an A4. The first, so my first fanzine, Whose Life Is It Anyway, was A4.
Mm.
Uh, back in the days, I used to, yeah, it's bizarre. So I'd write it down, and
Mm.
then I asked my it was my brother's girlfriend at the time, and then now his wife,
Mm.
could she type it up and work.
Wow.
So she used to
Okay.
type it up and work, and then she'd photocopy some of it, and then someone else would photocopy someone
Yeah.
else, and then I'd pay for some of it. That was a real, mishmash of things. And I think it was the second issue, she got paper that was slightly larger than A4.
Mm.
It's not A3. It was just slightly longer, like a kind of ledger,
Yeah.
foolscap, which is probably it was probably a US size or something. It
Yeah.
was that
American
kind of,
A4. Yeah, maybe.
and bizarrely enough, like when you think about it, so I did the fanzine as an A4, used her paper, and so I was able to give it to somebody else to photocopy, but the bottom of it was blank.
Right.
So nowadays you just cut it off, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I don't need that, so I can get a guillotine or I get a scissors. I didn't. I didn't even think to cut it off.
Right.
So I had half the pages were in the fool's cap, and the other half was A4. So aesthetically, it didn't look great, you know. But
That's good.
but anyway, and
Class.
then by the third issue, I kind of went, oh, hang on a second. If you fold all this in half, you can use less paper. So I don't
Mm.
need to try and get a few reams of paper. I can use half the reams. So then it became A5 in size. Yeah. So
Okay,
I
gotcha.
did so the first fanzine I did was called Whose Life Is It Anyway? And I
Mm.
did, I think it was five of them. I think mine
Right.
might be something telling me it's six, but I can't remember the sixth.
Yeah. Across like how many? Across how long would that be?
So that would have
Like
been across about so I was probably 15 to 18 with that.
wow.
And it was that thing, you're going around with plastic bags trying to sell them at gigs or going to
Yeah.
into town on a Saturday afternoon. My dad used to call us the Saturday afternoon gang, whatever was going on in near the
Hang around
centre.
Freebird.
Hanging around Freebird or Basement or
Mm.
Comet when it became
S06.
Comet and or whatever was going on outside the GPO on a Saturday afternoon,
Mm.
and um,
This is all very familiar, by the way. That
walking
was
down
my
O'Connell
Saturday
Street,
afternoon.
walking down O'Connell Street with 50 other people, help animal experiments or something like
Yeah.
that. So
And was that brings me to another thought. Did you find like from issue 1 to issue 6 probably was there more of the I guess issues coming in for want of a better term like veganism or animal research or one thing
yeah,
and another?
yeah. So I think in issue one, I was probably just reprinted a couple of leaflets that I'd got around, animal
Yeah.
animal experiments and then there might have been some stuff around, say, uh, stuff that was going on at the time, so Birmingham 6 or Guildford 4 or stuff like
Yeah.
that as well,
Yeah.
I remember going to this gig, Free Martin Foran gig, there was a big campaign to free Martin Foran. Nobody had any idea why we were trying to free him, but or any real idea other than, he seemed to have been something seemed to have been done against him,
Yeah.
and he eventually got free and I remember and there was a big celebration that Martin Foran got free and kind of having a conversation going, what did he do? But there was stuff going on, but we probably weren't, sorry, when I
Mm.
say we, I'm on about myself,
Mm.
uh, well read enough. Like
Mm.
the education came maybe from a newspaper,
Yeah.
that might have been a weekly political newspaper or it might have been a daily newspaper.
Mm.
There wasn't much research going on
Mm.
other than, oh, I'm reading about this is wrong, or something on a record.
Yeah.
So the politics didn't expand too much in the issues.
Yeah.
It probably got less, to be honest, without
Really?
even being conscious. I probably ended up, so I was in, like, I think again, I'm trying to remember what issue it was, 5 or 6, whatever the last one was,
Mm.
when I interviewed that Petrol Emotion.
All right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the questions, in the interviews, you'd be talking about whatever issues of the day, but in between, it was probably a lot of personal stuff. I was using stuff that I was writing just to kind of go, this kind of, when you're young, well,
Yeah.
sorry, when I
I
was young,
remember when I was young.
yeah, it's like, yeah, you don't have to be the same as everyone else. You don't have to follow the norms. That kind of stuff was being
Yeah.
written out rather than say a big political
Yeah.
statement, which in itself, for me, was very political.
Yeah, of course.
It's that kind of, take control and take charge of your own life,
Mm.
that kind of stuff.
Well, it creates the music scene, and it's particularly when you don't have the internet or whatever, it creates an access to a way of living and an alternative of social alternatives and so on that you wouldn't necessarily have otherwise,
Absolutely,
Mm.
Yeah.
absolutely. It was a way of life in it
Mm.
without thinking about it as a way of life. It's only when I look back now, it was a way of life, and you get your record and you read all the lyrics and you're absorbed by the record that week that you're listening to that week. Like I still buy records now, but I can tell you a lot more about the records I bought back in the late 80s than the ones I buy now. Because they just became part of what you were doing and you were having conversations with your friends. Oh, have you heard, what's this band Disorder? And you're going, oh, they're horrible. They're like,
Yeah.
or then someone else, and you're having these big discussions around, the validity of the electro hippies or something like that, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and just kind of going, ah, no, I don't really like that, you know, whatever. But you know,
Mm,
maybe that changes as you get older. I don't know. Maybe there's people now talking about the validity of, you know, whatever bands.
mm,
But if it really felt like there was this world going on, and it's just amazing to be part of it, without
mm,
knowing that you were a part of it, if you know what I mean. It's only looking back, you
mm.
kind of go, wow, that was something else, because it wasn't, you know, oh, my friends are all playing sports, so I'm just going to go and play sport or go to the pub that weekend. It was like, oh no, I'm going to this counter culture kind of thing. And
Mm. The thing that strikes me is even the record sleeves themselves. Like if you think about Rudimentary Peni or
mm,
Crass, there was eating and
yeah,
drinking and reading in
yeah,
those, and there were, you know, like I mean, Crass's ones would have practically fold
yeah,
out. And we're saying about like you're saying, Angus, about like communication. It's exactly what you're saying there, Niall. I mean, like stuff was it was there, and you could read it and you go through it, and you did learn
yeah,
from it in a
yeah,
way. And now, like I mean, I was just thinking somebody said this to me the other day. Like you know, if you stream, I don't stream for I have a problem with streaming because of the way it impacts on artists. But I will buy stuff on Bandcamp and stuff. But even when you buy that, you're not getting the liner notes any
no,
longer. So you're missing out on a whole experience, which one did have for all its flaws
yeah,
with
yeah.
vinyl.
Or you're getting a completely different experience. You know, our way of finding out about bands was like, oh, the Dead Kennedys are on Alternative Tentacles Records,
Mm,
so let's listen to everybody else who's on Alternative Tentacles. You know,
yeah,
and or Winston Smith. What else did he do artwork or whatever
yeah,
it would be? You know, or who produced that record and who else is that person producing? Um,
yeah.
and you'd be actively going out to find it, so that you've put an effort into something that then you have in your hands to listen to. You know, you'll give it, I won't say more attention. You'll certainly give it a lot of attention because you've had to go out and seek it. You
Mm.
know, yeah, it was an education, like and then but because I was doing the fanzine, I was, you know, writing to bands and writing to other people who wrote fanzines. So, you
Mm,
know, writing to Flux of Pink Indians and getting a letter back and going, oh, this is amazing, you know, and then going,
yeah.
okay, well, why wouldn't they? I've written to them, so why wouldn't they write back? You know,
Mm.
and then, you know, Chumbawamba writing to them and getting letters back, and really feeling that this is something that you're involved, that this that you belong to it, and we all belong in
Mm,
it together. So
mm,
so it is important if somebody's talking about Martin Foran, or it is important if somebody's talking
mm,
about, you know, stop animal experiments or whatever was going on,
mm.
you know, whatever protest march was happening or whatever, because we're all part of this little community, all
Yeah.
very different people. And like any community, like any group of people, there's,
Mm.
you know, like a classroom. I'd always say this, like if you get any group of people together, there's going to be some you agree with and there'll be some that you disagree with, but they're your community.
So how did it move on to the next phase? Like, where did?
Yeah, so I guess so I was, you know, in that band Vicarious Living, and then I we
Mm,
stopped playing or whatever, and then there was another band called Kill Devil Hill that I was playing
mm,
in, and Kill Devil Hill, there was a fellow I was in the band with, a fellow called Hugo Fitzgerald, and this is kind of where it all, from a gigs perspective, kind of kicked
mm,
off. So Hugo did his own fanzine as well, and I used to use Hugo's address because my mum and dad used to open my letters, you know, so I had to use Hugo's address so that my
ah,
mum and dad opened my
okay.
letters. Because so Hugo wrote to a band called the Membranes in England, and
Mm,
they're from Manchester, and he said, like, why have you never played in Dublin? And they
mm,
said, well, nobody has ever asked us. Sorry, and this is Hugo wrote them a letter. Well,
mm,
they wrote back, you know. So 2 or 3 weeks later, they go, nobody has ever asked us. 2 or 3 weeks later, then Hugo goes, well, I'm asking you, and then they write back and go,
mm.
well, okay, that's great. We'll come to Dublin. So
Right.
so myself and Hugo then went, oh, this is great. The membranes are going to come over. So we took out the hot press yearbook, which was used to come out every year, which listed venues around the country, uh,
Mm,
and And okay, well, we're going to try and get the membrane some gigs. So we got them a gig in Drogheda, Kilkenny, Limerick, and Dublin by ringing up the venues and saying, "Oh, there's this band of membranes from Manchester or from Blackpool playing. Can they play in your venue?" So that's how that happened. And membranes came over, and it was all great fun. And yeah, they played 4 gigs, and it all went really well. And we went around. Actually, that's where they played. That wasn't the Christchurch,
No,
was
that
the
was
following
later.
year.
Yeah.
So that was the first time they came over. They played in the Belvedere Hotel in Dublin. Like it went really well because there were bands coming over intermittently, but this was like a proper tour done in an independent way without any involvement from promoters, and it kind of showed that it could be done. And we went around, like Hugo was more into the aesthetics than I was, so Hugo was he was able to use Letraset better than I could, So, whereas I just take out a marker and write admission £2 or whatever. Hugo would do it proper. So there was, we got posters done up, and went around town with our flour and water as our paste to stick the posters up around town, and God, my poor mum who died last year, she always tell this story because she like this was 1986, I think 6, yeah, and so myself and my mum got a bus into town with a bucket of flour and water, and she held the flour and water while I pasted some of the posters.
You're joking.
Yeah. So that's the way that it was. It was such a family affair,
Yeah,
we were doing that kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah, with our membranes posters.
See, you'd almost fallen into being not promoters exactly, but organizing a tour by accident.
Oh yeah,
almost.
oh absolutely, yeah. It was like,
That's amazing.
Sure, nobody's putting the membranes are a great band. Nobody. So I'd written to them, and I'd interviewed them on my fanzine, and John Robb did a fanzine called it was Blackpool Rocks, or Rocks, and he was in the membranes, and it just we fell into it by default, and then the following year they wanted to come back over.
Yeah,
I wasn't in Kill Devil Hill at this stage. I left Kill Devil Hill because somebody spray painted Kill Devil Hill on the pillar of the central bank, and I went, "Why would you do that? That's stupid."
Yeah.
And, he went, "Oh no, everyone's going to see your name now," and I'm like, "Oh, I'm so." So that shows how stupid, I don't know, how pedantic I was. And then so, but I'd started another band there. They were called Not Our World, and then the membranes then looked to come back over to Dublin, and I was in Not Our World at that stage. So Hugo wasn't in the band, and he didn't want to do the tour. I think he was playing in a band called Fireworks Factory at that stage as well.
I remember them.
Yeah. And that's how I ended up organising then the second Membranes tour, and that's when they played in the Cathedral.
For an NCAD kind of thing. I remember it well. And didn't you play support, or did you play?
Not Our World played that gig. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Yeah. I think Louis Stewart played that gig, the jazz.
Yes, he did.
I think House played that gig as well.
And it's funny, I don't remember House at it, but that could have been earlier on, or maybe.
I don't know. They play.
Louis
Ball or whatever. Yeah.
It was an eclectic collection.
Yeah. And again, that's because Paddy O'Flaherty was from near me, and he offered to do the poster, and he went, "Oh yeah, I'll get this gig in NCAD." So that was the kind of start where you'd go, okay, so the Membranes can come over, we can get them a gig in NC. Well, it wasn't NC, but it was the NCAD ball.
But it was the NCAD,
and as part of that, they were told that they'd get. I've no recollection of how much they would have been paid, but let's say it was £200.
Neither do I.
But so I was
General Secretary at the time. Nope.
But I was able to tell the Membranes, all right, we've got you this gig. You have a guarantee of £200, or whatever it was. I can't
Yeah.
remember. That will either pay your ferry or that will go to paying, a lot of your ferry. So we'll get a few gigs around that weekend. So they played. I think we got a gig in like the back of Connolly Books in the New Theatre, which would have been
Yeah.
Connolly Youth
Sounds a
Hall.
bell.
I think it would have been called at the
Yeah,
time. Good old Eugene
that's
were there.
right.
So and I think that we also got them a gig in the Underground,
Right, yeah.
and
Of course, yeah, the underground was going at
the
that
Underground
stage,
was
wasn't
going
it?
at that stage, yeah.
Yeah.
And they played in Cork. So there was a fella called Morty McCarthy who now
Mm.
who then became the drummer in the Sultans of Ping. And
Mm.
he wrote a fanzine, and so I used to write to him, and he was in Cork. So we got the Membranes a gig in Cork. We got them a
Mm.
gig in Kilkenny and Henderson's bar in Kilkenny as well, just
Right.
by contacting Henderson. So yeah, it was a nice little tour that they did.
Did you have to do a lot of the logistics, like would they bring their own equipment, or would you have to find places for them to stay overnight, or would they stay in fans' places, or what was the
They
deal
just
there
they just
like?
stay in people's floors, yeah. So
Yeah.
um, so what they did and what a lot of bands did was they would get the ferry, like there was a weekend special on the ferry there. If you come over on Thursday and you went
Mm.
back on, I think it was Monday evening, you could, if there was whatever amount of nights it was, that you get the ferry for a certain price. And so they'd come over in the van. And at that stage, so the Membranes were the first band that kind of did this. There was a band in Wales called Anhreven. They're a Welsh language band living
Yeah.
near Holyhead in Carnarvon. So they started putting on gigs in Carnarvon. They
Right.
were a Welsh punk band. So a band could play in North Wales and then get the ferry over. So they'd have their van and they'd have their equipment. So most of the bands would have done it that way. And I think it was probably about £220 for their ferry journey, and then we try and figure out
Yeah.
how much approximately they'd get from each gig, and so you'd say,
Yeah.
yeah, you'll probably cover your ferry fare. So there was no, well, so we're hopping a bit again here because
Yeah,
we've
no,
only
go on.
spoken
This
about the
is
membranes, but like there was no contract or there was no, it's like,
mm.
yeah, if you want to come to Dublin, that's brilliant. We'd love to see you. So we'll get a gig for you, and along the way we'll try and get you some other places as well. And whatever money is there, but we can't guarantee it. And they
Right.
stayed in people's houses because
Sure
it
else.
just seemed to be the way it should be done,
Yeah.
Um,
And was this under the Hope moniker at this
at
stage,
that
or?
stage, the membranes, it wasn't that second membranes tour wasn't
Mm.
under the Hope name. And the Hope name came about. So when the membranes went back to England, John Robb, who was a journalist for Sound,
Mm.
he he
Yeah.
he told all his mates, "Oh, you should go to Ireland. It's great crack." And so, like, then Anne Revan came over from Wales, and then
Yeah.
a band called Fugazi were touring
Yeah.
in the UK, and we heard that they were going to do some gigs, and so got them to come over to Dublin through a lot of different
Mm.
investigative phone calls and that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at that stage, I said to Patrick O'Flaherty from
Mm.
NCAD, we're starting to put on gigs a bit regularly. You should give it a name. So when you're doing the poster for Fugazi, will you put a name on it? And Paddy goes, "Oh
Mm.
yeah, what will we do it? What name?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah." So another friend of mine, Michael Murphy, who was
Mm.
he was kind of like the non-playing member of the Pleasure Cell. So people would call him the manager of the Pleasure Cell, but we didn't use those
Right.
terms back then. It was like the non-playing member.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Michael said to me, what would be a great name would be Hope, because that's what you're trying to offer people. And I went, all
Right.
right, okay, yeah. So I said to Paddy, will you throw Hope on the poster? And of course he didn't. So officially you could say it was the first Hope gig, even though Hope wasn't on the poster, because that was the intention. But at that stage there
Paddy.
was more and more bands asking to come over. So
Mm.
and that's like where the Hope started being used, because there was a band called the Vandals They were an
Mm.
American band. They came over just around that time as well.
Mm.
And then a band called No Means No came over. Um,
Yeah.
and we started, the band I was in was Not Our World. And so we started doing kind of benefit gigs,
Yeah.
and then used the word hope promotions
On.
on them.
Did you guys, in a sense, become a point of contact then in the hardcore scene, punk and hardcore scene for US and English bands,
Yeah,
or
yeah. So
yeah,
the person who put Fugazi on in England, Johnny Wetspots, was his punk rock name. I think he's now known as Jabs. But so he helped Fugazi get gigs in the UK, and then
right,
so any bands then that he was trying to organise stuff for, he'd then maybe try and get them over to Ireland. Um,
mm,
and it just kind of evolved from there. So Fugazi, that was probably, I don't know, 1988 when we asked Fugazi. We didn't ask any other band after that. It was
mm.
people asking us then after that. Yeah, yeah.
Wow,
And it
okay,
all it all just kind of, well, I wouldn't say steamroll, but it all moved
yeah,
along nicely
snowballed, yeah,
after that. And it was
yeah,
then word getting around. Oh, you can now play in Dublin. It's
mm,
possible, because now there
mm,
were other people doing stuff. So like, I'm not trying to say that we paved the
mm,
way for everybody, but it was
mm.
now you could do something in Dublin, and the people in Dublin will try and get you gigs somewhere else. So it's a possibility to go to Ireland and not lose too much money.
Did you have so you'd have a list of places you could and venues you
Yeah,
could actually
well, it
host
kind
stuff,
of it
or
kind of evolved as well, you know. So it
mm,
started really with Dublin, and well, sorry, after. So there was Cork was an option
mm,
for a little while. Murty and then his friend Emmett, who's still putting on gigs,
mm,
Emmett Green in Cork, were doing stuff. Then there was the Belfast Gig Collective, which were doing stuff. They were based in the War Zone Centre in
mm,
Belfast. So there was this little venue in Belfast. Gyros was the name of it. It was like a
mm,
cafe and a venue. So and it was the Warzone Collective ran Gyros.
yeah,
So and then people then started the Belfast Gig Collective, just for the gigs
right,
part of it,
yeah,
and they put them on in different places like Belfast Art College, sometimes in
mm,
Gyros. Gyros was quite small though,
mm,
and then they used different venues around Belfast after that. But I played up there with Not Our World and started talking to people like Julia, was who I'd written, who did a fanzine a couple of years previously called Anxious, with her sister Sheena. And Julia and Sheena were one of the 51 someday walking down O'Connell Street for a Stop Animal Experiments march, um,
right,
and then so I was quite friendly with Julia, from writing letters, and that's how that we would have Dublin and Belfast. So if
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
when No Means No, for example, or when Fugazi then were coming back the following year, um,
yeah,
they were able to get Dublin and Belfast gigs. So a lot. So depending on who the band were, some of them were only in for 2 days and they could play Dublin and
mm,
Belfast, or some of them might want to, spend a weekend and we could get, a gig in Cork, and things evolved then because I started doing a newsletter called React, which was like a
mm,
little free sheet. So and that would say, there was like at one stage it went up to 5,000, where we're going out, and I'd send them to record shops around Ireland, like post them to record shops around Ireland.
mm,
And you might, so like New Ross, for example, there was people in a band called Brawl from New Ross. They wrote and says, "Oh, we wouldn't mind putting on some gigs in New Ross. How do you do it? This kind of stuff. How do you do it? I'm like, I don't know how you
yeah,
do it. You just do it. I don't know."
yeah,
And you figure it out. So
yeah,
then be able to say, I'll send the band down, put this gig on.
wow,
So places like New Ross,
yeah,
Carrickmacross and Monaghan, Kill in
mm,
Kildare. There was people in Derry for a little while.
mm,
Letterkenny had a couple. So,
mm,
Arklow had a couple. So just there were small places that were springing up
yeah,
over a short term. Because what would happen in those places, like people would just leave, people putting on
yeah,
the gig, they'd be
that's
gone,
it,
They weren't
yeah,
they weren't
so
staying
true,
there. So it wasn't that there was nobody there. to go to the gigs. It was just that the people who were doing the stuff creatively were moving out, you know.
Or
Yeah,
emigrating or
yeah,
what
yeah,
have
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And you know, that was a real reality. You know, that's
yeah,
because in the early '90s and late '80s, that was the export,
yeah,
wasn't it? Ireland's export were its people. So
absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
we we weren't all getting, you know, jobs for life.
No, definitely not. Did was there an upper limit in your head as to how big a gig should be, if that makes any sense?
Yeah,
Like, was there a sense for you that this particular music, it's quite a specific form in a sense. We'll have X number at a gig, but we're not going to go to another level. Or was that something just it was by dint of the fact they had smaller crowds coming to them
yeah.
and smaller fan
So I'd
bases?
say what probably would happen
Mm,
is that if a band got bigger, they would
mm,
probably go to a promoter. Because at that
okay.
stage, when the band were getting bigger audiences,
Mm,
they were looking to get guarantees, or their costs would rise for whatever reason. Um,
yeah.
so,
Okay.
so the way we put the membranes on was the way we put every other band on after that. So there was
Mm,
no kind of guarantee. You'd
yeah.
say to them, yeah, like so. Take Fugazi for example.
Mm,
We reckon they'll get 500 people. So we need to find a venue that fits 500 people.
yeah.
And tell Fugazi, we think you'll get about 500 people. Can't be sure.
Yeah.
So if we charge £3, that's 1,500 quid. The venue costs
Yeah.
this, and this is what's going to be left over. That's what we expect to happen.
Fair enough.
And but then the following week, it could be a band called the Keatons, an
Mm,
English indie pop kind of band, more,
right.
be going, well, we reckon they'll get about 30 people. you know, so it wasn't like, oh, we'll only deal with bands of a certain size, whether that's small or big.
Yeah.
It was like whoever
Yeah.
were coming over. But most of the bands that were asking to play in Dublin,
Mm,
I'd say the reality was there weren't too many other people going to put them on in Dublin.
okay. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. That makes sense.
because if they could get somewhere, if they could get someone else that would guarantee them money, a
They,
hotel or something, you know, like,
they go.
I always tell this story, and because I put it out there, it's not embarrassing, but it should be.
Mm,
But like there was a band, like I mentioned the Vandals earlier on.
mm,
So the Vandals came, they played, and they were coming over on foot on the ferry, and
mm,
so I said, yeah, we'll meet you out in Dunleary. What we can do that night is like we were able to get them two gigs that night, one in the Grattan, the Earl Grattan, and then we're able to get them onto some sort of late night gig in Sides. We were thrilled
mm,
with ourselves because that'd be like, maybe 100 quid from each gig, which would help pay for the ferry.
mm.
And I went out, I met them off the ferry. They came off as foot passengers and went, all right, yeah, hey, where are we going? And I just went, oh yeah, the bus stop's here. So walked to the bus stop, and they were sitting on the bus like they didn't like no idea what was. They're in Dublin and suddenly they're on public transport to Granton,
Right.
and it only occurred to me. It probably took me like in all honesty, it's probably like 15 years later when I realized I should have even asked my dad to bring them into town or something, because that's the like so that was the innocence or
Yeah.
naivety, or that's
Mm,
where we were based. It wasn't like me thinking, oh, I'm making a statement here in any way. It
mm,
was just like,
mm.
yeah, well, I traveled out on the bus, so why wouldn't they? And
mm.
and when you think
Yeah.
about it, like it was all wrong.
Were they shocked?
They were shocked, but
They
they
were
were
shocked.
shocked.
Yeah.
But I only heard secondhand that they were shocked. They didn't say it to me
Yeah.
that they were
Yeah.
shocked, but it was only when they're telling stories, going, "Oh man, you wouldn't believe what happened. We got off the ferry." And
Hey, you
and when
can.
I heard that back, I was like, "Well, why wouldn't they get the bus? What's wrong with getting the bus?" Without
Yeah.
thinking that, of course, they're in a band, they're tired, they might want to, just sit and they've come on a ferry journey, they might want to relax
Yeah.
somewhere. Whereas I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
we've made you a few sandwiches, hop on the bus, here's your sandwiches, and we're going to play a gig. So there's a romanticism about it all, but like really, it's not a model for how to work in the music business.
Did you Did you find most clearly if it was people who were approaching you guys, and I presume at this stage it was all under Hope
Yes,
Promotion or
all under
under
the name
Hope,
Hope
yeah,
Promotions at this stage.
yeah.
Yeah,
In a broad political
yeah,
sense, they'd be of a similar sort of mind that there'd be animal
yeah,
rights,
yeah,
stroke, various
yeah,
campaigns, and that was more or less the way it went.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
I suppose the thing for me was if they're on a major record label, then they
mm,
don't need me to help them out. Um,
yeah, yeah,
and that was, and it wasn't me saying that you shouldn't be on a major record label. It was me going, well, if
mm,
you're on a major record label, that's a road you've decided to go on. Look to you,
mm,
that's fine.
yeah,
So if they weren't on that major record label as a band, they've probably already made a conscious choice to do things a certain way anyway.
yeah,
So there was a couple of maybe times when it was close to being like there was a band called Babes in Thailand. We
hmm
put them on, and it was just before they'd signed to whatever record label they'd signed to,
yeah, yeah,
and feeling that they may have even signed to them before they came over. But at the time
mm,
when it was through John Loder in Southern Studios who had asked
mm,
about them coming over. So it wasn't in the world of agents at that. But,
yeah,
and I remember we were all so fixated with this kind of stuff at the time, record labels and being on a major record label and people saying, "Oh,
yeah.
that's terrible. You've put on Babes in Thailand. They're about to sign to,
Mm.
I think it was Sire Records maybe." And I was
Wow.
like, "Oh, I didn't know that." But and you'd be thinking
Mind
about
you,
it.
the Ramones were on Sire.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So were the Undertones.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah,
anyway, sorry, go
yeah,
on. We digress.
so I was kind of doing this thing
Yeah.
under this name, not to be
Mm.
part of the music business, but to be on a different road. So
Yeah.
if a
Yeah.
band was part of the music business, grand, but don't come onto our road. Don't leave our barrel of
Yeah.
apples clean. Don't bring the dirty apple into our barrel of apples. No, well, no, not really, but you know what I mean. Like it was.
But no, I do. Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
this is what we're trying. So the bands that were on this one were
Mm.
mostly happy to be on that. Obviously then there was
Yeah.
some bands using it as a stepping stone, and
Mm.
that's absolutely their prerogative.
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't predict as well. I mean, that's a tricky one to predict anyway. Like a band moves from one area to
Yeah.
another.
Yeah. No, for sure, for sure.
We used to. I mean, React is one thing. Did you have a separate fanzine or anything at this
So
stage,
at
or had
that
that kind of
stage,
begun to?
so at that stage, I did a fanzine called Whose Life Is It Anyway? I did another fanzine called
Mm.
Sketch. I'm trying to remember when that was. It was probably after React Sketch was. Yeah.
Right.
And then I did a
Yeah.
fanzine called Hope. So and then Sketch for a little while I did with it as a kind of a split fanzine with myself. So one half of me was doing Sketch and the other half of me was doing a fanzine called No Way Referee, which was a football fanzine.
On the same fanzine.
Yeah, so you flipped it over. So one side it was football and you
Wow.
flipped it over and then it was Sketch.
And did that work in the sense of like, do people like it?
I don't know.
Okay.
So it worked in the fact that I was able to produce it and I was able to help.
Happy with it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting because you don't usually get a commonality between the two. They're quite diverse.
yeah, but when you think about
cultural
it,
areas.
like
Oh,
a
makes
lot of
perfect
people like
sense.
football and music,
Yeah.
so it should work.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
Did it last a long
Again,
time? I
again,
should ask.
it lasted. I think that lasted maybe 8 issues. It's like I did it all myself, and photocopying it
Mm.
myself and stapling it all, together. So,
Yeah. Was there a point where you actually said, right, the fanzine form is, or fanzines or something which I'm going to drift away from, or was it just a develop? I mean, was it just the way
just the
things
way
went?
things
Or
went, really, Um,
yeah,
fanzines are a lot of work.
yeah, big
Sorry,
time.
fanzines were a lot of work when there's no
Mm.
copy and pasting, so everything had to be typed out or everything had to be cut and stuck on a page.
Yeah, yeah,
I still have a lot of the originals. They're
yeah,
so thick because it's all clippings, it's all newspaper clippings, and you take letters from a newspaper to. It was like these
yeah.
kidnap ransom letters. Put together.
Yeah, it's the old sniffing glue thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
You know, remember?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And then
the
and
original
then I'm
pulp
not a very
fanzine.
good I never did any of this. I never wanted to do any of this for any kind of financial gain.
Mm,
And
mm,
so I'm not good when it comes to to money. And it's not,
mm,
it's just like I don't really want to ask somebody to give me money for anything.
mm,
So
mm.
when you're going around trying to sell a fanzine because you kind of feel that you need to get the money back that you've put into it,
Yeah,
I just don't enjoy that. And even now,
yeah,
so I did those fanzines. I've brought out a couple of books since,
yeah,
like going into a shop and asking somebody to stock your book. I just find one of the most uncomfortable experiences to do. I
Mm.
just don't like doing it at
yeah,
all. So so that's probably why I stopped doing the fanzine because I was like, oh, it's like, when you think about it, there's like kind of,
yeah,
it's like almost like a vanity thing where you're like, oh, you should want to take my stuff. Like, why would they? You know? So,
yeah.
yeah,
Though it is an informational thing, and people do enjoy it. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you were saying about NCID. I remember an NCID Students' Union many years ago. A mutual acquaintance used to troop in. I won't say the name of the fanzine, but and get it photocopied,
yeah,
right, using student union resources, and this would happen every month. And the poor old photocopier was like being worn
yeah,
down
yeah.
by his efforts. And again, it was a punk fanzine, but again, I won't say which one it was. But he was an awful nice guy. And yeah, I was like, it was very, yeah, I don't know. I take your point. Like, there is obviously, like, look, it's like everything's, there's a degree of oneself in everything. But if there's a thing where people really have care and attention and they want to get something out there, it's positive. And the other side as well is like with what you're doing with Hope and other people involved in the collective, like then there's a promotional aspect, which I think is its own
Yeah,
justification.
yeah, and that's how when React came out. So React
Mm,
was a newsletter, and the handy thing about React was I was able to then advertise the gigs that were coming up, and then write
mm,
about, but it was a free sheet, so I didn't have to ask anyone to
mm.
buy it, which was very handy.
Okay, yeah,
And
yeah.
and I was able to use money that had come in from gigs to pay for
Mm,
it. Now you're talking like maybe
mm,
30 quid to pay for whatever it was, 2,000 copies. It got up to whatever, 5,000 or whatever. But
mm.
that was fine because it doesn't matter whether anyone buys it or not. You just hand it to them.
Yeah, yeah,
So that was much easier than doing a fancy.
Mm.
yeah. In the mid 90s, where did I mean, you're mentioning Babes in Thailand and you're mentioning
Yeah,
Biss, and so that'd been early to mid
yeah,
90s. Where did things go after that in terms of hope?
yeah,
And did it change? Did it change fundamentally in any way, or did it change in
yeah. So
larger small ways?
so a bit, I suppose, like you're kind of skipping through it. Well, sorry, we're going through a different phases, going from one to the other. But the the
Mm,
the biggest thing was, I suppose, in May 1992,
mm,
was when we put Fugazi on. When Fugazi looked to come over, I think it was
mm,
probably the fourth or fifth time, maybe the fourth time. So we put them on McGonagall's each time, uh,
mm,
and and the second time that Fugazi played in Dublin, it was that thing, right? Here's
mm.
here's all the money that's left over on the night. Here you go, Ian McCoy. Here's your money. And he was like,
Yeah,
"Oh no, hang on a second. We're not taking all this money. You take whatever it was, over half, and you go and
right.
make stuff happen." And I was like, "Oh no, I don't want that." And they're like, "No, no, you do that." And that's really, that kind of kept us going in gigs for probably 2 years.
Wow.
It was from memory, I think it was about 550 quid, and that acted as the kind of the buffer,
Seed
the
capital. Yeah,
seed cap. Very good. The you of the
yeah.
words, the
The,
float.
Yeah.
the float, yeah. Let's be
but
honest.
but then when Fugazi then played, like, and sold out McGonagall's the next time they played
Mm.
McGonagall's.
And Fugazi were huge. I mean, we have to contextualize this. Like Fugazi,
Fugazi were huge, and so when they
huge.
came,
And
it was May 1992, and
mm,
um, Fugazi were looking to play again, and
mm,
I'm going right. Fugazi are going to be massive. Like McGonagall's was
mm,
like maybe 600 people or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're going to
Yeah.
get a bigger crowd. You're talking somewhere where we have to find that fits 1,000 people.
Wow.
And so we went, okay, looks like this could be in the SFX, and like,
Yeah.
how do I get the SFX? So I had to then, try and get some more people to help out, because if you put a gig on the SFX. So used
Mm.
Students' Union, you mentioned, the
Mm.
AD earlier, and maybe we might reference some of the student union stuff and the ends officers,
Mm.
because that was gold for someone for what we
Yeah.
were doing in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Went to the Trinity Ents officer and
Right.
said, right, how do you think we could get the SFX? Colin O'Dwyer was his name.
Mm.
And Colin goes, oh God, yeah, that could be difficult. It was Trinity's anniversary. Would it be 400, 500 years? Trinity College? Well, it was.
Yeah.
Maybe we can edit that out. I'll say Trinity's
Yeah.
400-year anniversary. It was Trinity's
Oh,
500-year
Trinity's
anniversary.
500 year anniversary.
It was
Yeah.
one of those anniversaries, the Trinity something 100. It was a centenary. It was around the birthday for them,
Yeah.
and they were doing a whole year of stuff. So we've thought if Colin goes and asks the Jesuits who run the SFX, could
Oh, yeah.
they put the gig on as part of the Trinity,
Yeah.
whatever?
Yeah.
And the Jesuits were open to that.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and I told a little lie earlier because I said that after Fugazi, we didn't ask anyone else. We actually asked Chumbawamba to play that gig. Because I said to Colin, all right, so if this Trinity thing is on, do you think you could put something on in the afternoon?
Right.
Because they had these kind of afternoon
Yeah.
shows. And Colin went, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I said, do you think you could pay for Chumbawamba to come over? He goes, yeah, I suppose so. So that's how. So Chumbawamba added to the bill, the Fugazi bill,
Wow.
and Trinity College. They played the gig in Trinity that afternoon, and that paid Chumbawamba's fare over to Dublin for the gig. And it was
Right.
just before Chumbawamba had signed to a major record label. So thankfully they hadn't signed, and they didn't have to deal with all that stuff. But
Right. Yeah.
But by Fugazi playing the SFX, it was like a huge amount of time was spent trying to organize that gig. But the thinking was, all right, we're going to be a lot of people here. What can we do now that we have a captive audience? So myself and Paddy and a couple of other fellas would have conversations. Used to go into the Winding Stair on Saturday afternoon and plan these things out in advance over a cup of coffee. And there was one person who came to the gigs and offered to help out. A fellow called Brian. And he said he was involved with Act Up and said, well, this would be great if it was like an Act Up benefit. And it was less the benefit, but more the fact that you're making a statement by supporting Act Up or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Big time.
I contacted Jabs in England and said, do you think Fugazi would be up for doing this as a benefit if we pay for the like we reckon there'll be enough people to cover their ferry costs. So if we pay for the ferry costs, and they were very open to it. And Chumbawamba were
Brilliant.
very, very open to it. So they came over to
Yeah.
Dublin and played. But it was after that then that people came up and were going, oh, this is pretty cool, or this is pretty interesting. Can we get involved and can we help out? So I was like, yes, please do. That's great. So we kind of went, right, we should try and get more people and change the Hope promotions to like Hope Collective and try and push that collectivism even in the title of what we're doing here, because putting the name Hope Collective says something rather than the name Hope Promotions. You're making it more of a statement even with that. And so we sat down and went, right, what are we going to do? We were great for having a cup of tea once a week, it's great. And so we just went, anyone want to get involved? True React, anyone want to get involved, send us a letter. And we sat, I think there was probably, I don't know, maybe 8 people then became the Hope Collective. And we went to Derek and Finbar's once a week, had some tea, paid our subs. decided that we'd pay subs of £2 a week if you could afford it. It didn't really matter if you paid or didn't pay; it was okay. And we're built up a little bit of a, what do you call that, seed capital,
Fighting
a
fund,
kitty.
fighting fund.
uh, and then agreed that we'd all pay into the gigs as well, so that because there was a lot of people ready to help out. We went, well, we're all
Yeah.
going to pay into these gigs, so we're all the same as everybody else. The people playing, the people attending, the people organising. We all have our part to play in what's going on here. So that's kind of where the Hope Collective
Yeah.
stemmed from, that Fugazi gig, and more people, more notice, I suppose, then, and people wanting to be going, oh yeah, this can happen.
And did it get more elaborate then in terms of like the stuff you're putting on, or was it more or less around, you know?
No, it was pretty much, to be honest, it was pretty much the same. What we used to do is we'd sit down every week at our Hope Collective meetings and see who had written to us asking to play, and we'd discuss the bands and go, all right, do we really want to put this band on, or should we put this band on? Like, I remember even now there was a band called the Abs from Wales.
Right.
They were looking to play, and this I don't know. This is the way we did it. It was our thing, so it was our choice. We could do whatever we wanted because it was our choice, I suppose. But the Abs had an album, and there was a picture of a woman in a bikini on the insert of the album. So we went, no, we don't want to put them on. We knew nothing about them really, and they're probably very nice people. And it wasn't, we didn't interview them, right? It wasn't that. We just like, nah, we don't want to have to deal with that. So, but most of the bands we would have said yes to, but it was just I just remember that band.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that I don't think they were, I don't know. I haven't had any conversation with anyone about the validity or lack of validity of putting a picture of a woman, but like, it made no sense to us anyway at the time.
Yeah. It seems a bit from left field, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Like,
but who knows?
something
Who
like
knows?
that in the context of,
Who knows? There could be a context. I don't know, but
yeah.
but what would so we weren't coming out and making a statement about anything, but the way we did things was our statement. If you
Yeah, completely.
so
It's an amazing lineup, actually, right the way through the 90s of stuff that came through, and after, obviously. But I mean, just like, I was surprised going back through the list, reading it, just seeing who was on it. Like, as you said, like Babes in Thailand and Space and so forth, and Bikini Kill, and like these are all groups which went on to have a storied history. Well, many of them. Anyway.
And there was a band called Jawbreaker came a couple of times, and Jawbreaker, I think, played a few gigs a couple of years ago. Really big venues. Yeah.
What's the name? Pitch. What do they call themselves?
Pitch Shifter.
Pitch Shifter.
Yeah, they played. Yeah, we played them. There was a band from the Netherlands called the X. They played. They're an amazing band. I back at that stage, there weren't too many other people doing this kind of stuff. So a lot of those bands then, because there wasn't money in it, so we were fine. We didn't need to make any career out of it. There was a shift in that thinking, probably more in the mid '90s. So we'd put on a lot of those bands, like Corner Shop. We just before they're brimful of Asha, Corner Shop are great, and they're really nice people. It was around the mid '90s when it started to creep in that bands were starting to maybe expect things, starting to change just a little bit. And we were full on organising stuff, but because what we used to do is we'd make sandwiches, we'd bring them in for the band, we'd feed the band, they'd come back and stay in one of our houses, and we would open our house as if it was their own, like treat them as best we could, and then send them off after breakfast the next day to go and play the next place. But then you could there was mostly from bands coming over from America. There was a bit like, where's my room, where's my bed, and absolutely, like, I'm not saying they shouldn't do that, but they were in the wrong place if they were looking for that, Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and I
yeah.
think, you know, you're talking more late 1998 at this stage, whereas
Mm,
there was bands kind of going, "What do you mean we're on at this time? We need to be on at a certain time." You know, there was stuff like that being said. You know, and
yeah.
there was more an expectation of different things. People were then starting to kind of go, "Oh, do you know what? There's an audience here." That probably, I don't know. I don't know when. I can't remember when Nirvana got big, and there was probably more money going around, and bands like Jawbreaker had signed to major record labels, and there
Mm,
was more of a chance of these bands making a living. And
yeah.
if they were trying to make a living, they were in the wrong place coming to us.
Yeah,
Uh,
Jesus. Yeah.
but you know, they were
Yeah.
probably trying to get agents, and they were probably, you know, there was probably someone in the UK helping them out with gigs, and then suddenly that
Mm,
person contacts us, and we go yes, and but the band have a different perception on money, like, you
mm.
know.
And even if they were like-minded, did you find that even if they were like-minded, say on broader
Yes,
campaigning issues, or
yeah,
so it didn't really matter that it was more like just their fundamentally they were beginning to see it. So would you say that was like they're beginning to kind of see it almost in careerist terms, but not exactly?
yeah. So I think it just I think finance became a thing. Sorry, not the world of like money became a thing.
Yeah.
Whereas, whereas before, like people were going, "Oh, it's costing me so much money to be in a band." You're going, "Well, that's your
Mm,
hobby, is it not?" You know, like
mm,
hobbies cost money. So, are you
that's a
doing
great
the
point.
band for your hobby, or are you doing the band
Yeah.
for it to meet all your costs? And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say
Mm,
that they shouldn't do that. Like, absolutely,
mm,
they can do whatever the hell they want. And
yeah.
certainly, if they're going off and doing really dodgy stuff, I don't want to listen to them even. But like,
Yeah,
if they
quite
want
so.
it to be their career, that's okay. It's like, say, if people in podcasts wanted to be their career, they're not going to interview me. They're going to find someone else, you know, and they're
Yeah,
entitled to do whatever
exactly. Yeah.
podcast they want.
Yeah, yeah.
But there was more bands then kind of going, like, what's our guarantee? And I'm like, yeah, well, there's no guarantee. We don't know how many people are going to be
Guarantee.
here, you know.
Mm.
And you can understand
Wow.
why, because they're going, oh, it's costing us a fortune to, you know, come over here. Like,
Mm,
but now we would have always made great efforts to cover the band's travel costs,
mm,
but absolutely understandable. Like,
mm.
you know, imagine you're at home, you're renting your house, and then you have to go on tour for 2 months, and everybody's beating
Yeah,
your
yeah.
travel costs. But what about your rent costs? You know, you still have
Yeah,
to
yeah,
happen.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
but and then there was some people even around Dublin, where they kind of saw it as an opportunity here to maybe this might work as a career, uh, or this might
Mm,
work as a job, you know, probably a poorly paid job,
mm.
but as a job. And when that was the case, that's kind of where, like, that was the late '90s, and it was like, you know what, I'm just trying to, I don't want to do this to try and help someone's give them a step up the ladder for
Yeah,
their career. Let them find something else. I was trying
yeah.
to do something that was creating a bit of that felt like it was creating an alternative community, you know.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how in that kind of late '90s there was, like, you mentioned those bands that was probably like, you know, 90, you know, there was like a 4 or 5 year golden years, you know. There was
Mm,
no one else doing it. The opportunity was like there was bigger promoters, MCD, but like if MCD
yeah.
put on, they could put on Fugazi, sure, but if they put
Mm,
on, say, the X, you know, 200
yeah,
people,
they're
that
not
means
gonna do it.
nothing to them. Whereas
Yeah.
200 people is a perfect number for us, you know.
Mm,
But then it started getting a little bit more popular, and you know, bands,
mm,
places like the Mean Fiddler, places like that were opening, you know, and there was potential in you know, making money
mm.
out of it. So bands were looking to go there, and then suddenly they'd rock up, and we'd be trying to put them on, you know, in an afternoon gig in wherever it might be at that stage.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in a sense, like it seems to me like Hope was always kind of being there, very clearly functioning in terms of a broad number of people have a similar sort of mindset.
Yeah,
And as you say, like it all, like it's like there's not a huge distinction between the fans and the music
yeah,
and the musicians and the rest. So in other words, like that, it's fitting a niche, which is quite a big niche actually, but it kind of just works there. And have you seen that as like, you know, the 90s moved into the 2000s?
yeah. So my involvement with Hope finished. So we went away for 6 months and came back, and that's when the Hope Collective
Mm,
really kicked off. So that was that time.
right.
Then my involvement stopped. Well, our first daughter was born in June 1999, and so it was
Right.
fizzling out then. Then that's kind of when
Yeah.
I think that we might have. There was a couple of gigs maybe after that, but then it stopped.
Yeah.
Just life and priorities. Then
Yeah.
so I remember there was a band called Happy Anger from France, and it was a couple of days before she was born, and they were playing in
Mm,
a Fusion on Townsend Street. It was a biker bar,
right.
and I remember there I was actually sitting in the car outside with Miriam on a day of it, kind of going like, I feel like I'm a promoter here. Like I'm not enjoying this at all, and
Really? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and it just doesn't feel like, this is a band from France coming over. This should be really good, and
Mm,
it felt like just going through kind of the motions just to do it. So, and the
mm.
fact that, it was just before our daughter was born.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'm looking here, it was the 28th of May and she was born on the 2nd of June, so it was very close. Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of went, have we done enough? Have we done
Mm,
as much as we can? So, but there
yeah.
was there was a commitment to a few more bands after that. A
Mm,
couple of good bands, and
mm,
I think it all finished at the end of December. There was a band from DC called The Sorts, and
right.
so I stopped going to the Hope Collective meetings after Ellen was born in June. Not out of any. It was just like my daughter was born, so I wasn't going to go to the weekly meetings, and then the weekly meetings kind of fizzled out then, and then
Mm.
Yeah.
November stopped. And then we published a book about it in
Yeah.
2002 and got the bands who had played, or asked all the bands who had played to submit a vegan recipe. And that was kind of trying to tell the story of each gig,
Mm,
as in, this is what we were doing. It was completely independent. Also,
mm.
without blatantly saying, we're trying to push a lifestyle here. Um,
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
just so happens here's 180 vegan recipes.
By pure
Pure
coincidence.
coincidence.
Subtle
But,
hint.
but that was all, like when we were at Hope Collective, what we used to do as well is like we used to make popcorn and stuff and give them out at gigs, and
Mm,
sometimes vegan cupcakes, and you'd give out recipes and stuff at gigs as well, just
I remember some cupcakes. Those were good days.
just trying to you know go, let's look after each other here, or whatever way it was,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, so that's what we wrote the book about it. That
Yeah.
came out whenever in 2002. That was called Document a Story of Hope. So the idea was to document what had happened,
Yeah.
and that was tell each gig had a page, and then each band
Yeah.
had a chance to give a recipe or whatever. So yeah, and that's it kind of evolved into that, and then we stopped for a while. Brought out the book, and again it was like, all right, so we're putting a book together,
Mm,
typing it all up, and back in the old dial-up modem days, there was a fellow in Cork,
mm,
Jim Morris, who was a printer in Cork. So it was like, okay, well, will you print a book, Jim? Like, because it
mm,
wasn't a case of going to a book publisher and saying, I have a story
mm,
for a book. It was like, yeah, well, we'll have a story, so we're going to publish the book.
Mm.
mm.
And at 11 o'clock at night, you'd get the modem going, and you try and send a chapter of the book down to Jim, and hope by 7 o'clock the next morning your
Yeah.
internet connection hadn't fallen, or the book had gone, the chapter had gone. So
Uh-huh.
as it turned out, we tried that for about 2 weeks, and it didn't work. So my mom and dad had to drive down
Oh,
with the book on, I don't know, maybe a floppy disk or something. I can't
gotta say, your parents are very, very good in all of this, for
Absolutely.
people who read your mail, you know what I mean? Or
Absolutely.
opened your
Yeah.
mail.
Well, no, no, they really were.
Very
They
good.
really were. And you kind of mentioned earlier about like not having the internet, and this thing
Mm,
happening. Like there is a story, that the second time Fugazi played in Dublin, they missed the ferry. Well, they always missed the ferry anyway, but they'd missed the ferry, and so I was in, I was in McGonagall's setting things up,
mm,
and
mm,
my dad drives into town, and in the day when you could drive in up South Ann Street or whatever, where
Yeah.
McGonagall's was, and he gets out of the car and finds me and says, "Oh, there was some band on the phone. They've missed the ferry." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah. I think they're going to try and get the next one though."
Right.
This was like 6 o'clock on the night of the gig, and I'm going, "What? Oh, okay, Dad. Thanks."
Get your bass and start doing
Jesus.
some vamping. Yeah.
So what happened?
So
Like,
I had to make make a choice. So the gig started, and went, okay, right, let's go ahead with this gig and hope that they get here. So the gig went ahead. Yeah, I was in the first band and we played Not Our World, and just when we were playing, Fugazi arrived into McGonagall's. But so what I did though is when people were coming in, I was saying, listen, like telling them, at the door, Fugazi are on the way. I'm hoping they'll be here. There's a chance they mightn't. So I don't know what we would have done.
God.
Yeah, but sorry, my mum and dad were always like really supportive and open to stuff
Yeah.
and ready to help out
Yeah.
with stuff. And even in the early Fugazi, the first Fugazi gig in Dublin, like I had three older brothers then. They came in and they were the security. They were holding up the PA, making sure it wouldn't fall. They did after the second one and all. Like so yeah, yeah. And
Fair
it
dues. Yeah,
was
that's
all
great.
good. Yeah.
I mean, like there's 3 publications
So
at this stage, 3 books at
So,
this stage, isn't it?
so what we've done is like document the story of Hope was the first book, and then that book
Yeah.
there was a publisher in the States called Soft Skull Press, and they asked to publish it in the States, and I went, oh
Yeah.
no, why would you do that? And the fella who ran Soft Skull was a fella called Richard Nash from Limerick, and so he kind of wrote to me a few times and was like, "Oh yeah, Soft Skull had done some good books, there's some good political books as well." And
Mm.
I eventually kind of went, "Yeah, okay, if you want to do it." But it was probably I don't this thing where you don't look back and regret stuff or have things, but it's probably the one thing I regret doing, to be honest. Having someone else publish it. Because
Really?
yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, yeah, it got out there. It was, and they called it "Please Read Me."
Yeah.
Feed me. Sorry,
Feed
please
Me.
feed
No.
me. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Well
Yeah.
done for remembering.
Kind of, it was a riff, wasn't it, on Please Kill Me,
yes.
was it?
And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, like,
what was
no,
wrong
the
with
other
what
one,
it was
yeah.
called? I was like, what? It had its own name.
Yeah.
Like, what are you trying to do here? But of course, Please Kill Me was about the New York scene. So he was trying to say, oh, you can blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. An oral history of punk in New York. Yeah. So they're trying to latch onto
So,
that. Yeah. Latch onto that.
yeah, but then you just lose control over it. Suddenly it's there
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, it was redesigned. Now it was redesigned and I had to say, like, give it the okay and all, but I'd no real input into how it looked. Looked fine and all, but it wasn't mine. In 1991 we put out a record as well. Like, it was for a compilation called "A Statement Is a Weapon in an Empty Hand." Mexican Pets, Cunis, In Motion, and a band called Wheel. But even doing that was, like, it was Paddy designed it, but it was all like, everything came through my hands, whereas that was just kind of like, oh yeah, this thing happened over in a different country. Yeah, that was the first book, and then there was a bit of a hiatus for a number of years, doing an odd event every now and again, including the Evens, which was Ian MacKay's next band after Fugazi. And then started doing, an odd benefit gig under the We Shall Overcome name. And then my friend Michael said, "Oh, sure, why don't we put together a book?" And that was called, we asked some people to write stories. I did a fanzine called Hope, and the fanzine, what I did, the first issue was I wrote to people and just said, "Can you tell me what punk rock means to you?" And so got, a number of people to write their stories about that. And then the next issue was like, what was your favorite gig? And so my thinking then was to do like just one question, ask a whole lot of people the same question, and that would be the fanzine, and I'd bring it out every year. So I got the 2 issues, and then Michael says, why don't we make what was your favorite gig, like a book? and ask people in bands in Ireland. So Michael is
Yeah.
in academic, and
Mm.
he has a very strong belief that we need to document these stories while people are still alive.
Mm.
Have them there, not just in people's memory, just in, same way as us doing this podcast. At least it'll be there
Yeah.
regardless of what happens to us. So we asked people in bands in Ireland what their favorite gig was, and that book was called In Concert. And then that was a benefit for the Irish Red Cross, because if you're doing a book, well, you have to have, well, it wasn't going to be for us to make money out of it. So,
Mm.
and then the next thing was, well, it kind of went all right. We sold 1,000 copies, printed 1,000 and
Mm.
sold it, and made, I think it was about maybe 10,000, no, 7,000 for the Irish Red Cross.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then the next one was, it was during COVID or whatever, and I think Michael was living in England and he couldn't get back to Ireland. He was stuck in, no, not stuck, but he was with his girlfriend who lived just outside Birmingham. He was actually coming back from holiday, and he had a choice to go to Birmingham or back to Dublin just at that weekend when COVID was.
Mm.
And he said, "Oh, sure, I'll go back for the week and then I'll head home." He was stuck
Oh,
there. He got stuck there.
Yeah.
So while we were over there, he saw a lot of the work that the NHS were doing, and so he wanted to put a
Mm.
book together for the NHS Trust. So we asked people. That was called Great Gig Memories. So that was the third book that we put
Yeah.
together, and so it was the same thing. Your
Yeah.
favorite gig, and we did another one then called Punks Listen. So Michael is kind of the ideas man as well. He was the kind of the brains behind doing it, and then I kind of go, yeah, all right. Oh no, I'm going to have to do this now.
There goes another 3 or 6 months of your life, or
Yeah,
12.
great idea. I have to do it.
Yeah.
The Punks Listen was the last book that we did, and again, so we can certainly talk about validities or not of major charities.
Mm.
But the book is for the Irish Red Cross's fund on the Ukrainian crisis, appeal, as they call it. But
Yeah.
From my perspective, it was reaching out to people to get them to write stories to show that
Mm.
we want to support communities, not necessarily that we want
Yeah.
to support the Irish Red Cross. Whatever about that. They
Yeah.
probably they don't need our €10,000 that we make on a book. But
Yeah.
you're making a statement to say what's happening here. It's important for us to reach out and support people. And so yeah, like those books have been very interesting. Like so we've done that. Punks Listen, Great Gig Memories, In Concert,
Yeah.
and kind of go, right, who are we going to write to here and ask, will they write a story? So it's become very interesting, because there's been people who've written for these books that we could only dream about, I suppose. Henry Rollins wrote for one of them, and people are really
Yeah.
generous. That's the thing that we found. People are really generous.
So do you have more in the works? Is this like this an
Yeah,
ongoing
so
project
so
in a
we've just
sense?
it's funny because you'd asked about this, but we just produced
Yeah.
a fanzine of Punks Listen. It's like a supplementary to the book. It was like a number of people
All
who
right.
didn't make it in. So people like Bill
Right.
Drummond from the KLF has written a
Yeah,
story
yeah.
for our publication, which is kind of nice. Cool.
Kind
Yeah.
of cool. On the live side of things, is that something now in this post-pandemic world that you feel comfortable doing, or is it something that you want to do intermittently, or how
So,
does that
what
work?
I kind of like doing now, so there's a lot of people doing good stuff around Dublin. So I don't need to
Mm.
add into that mix. That's kind of my feeling on it. It's not that I won't or wouldn't. So when I was when the Membranes came to Dublin in 1988, without sounding, there weren't too many other people that I couldn't go to someone and say, "Oh, will you put the Membranes on?" Whereas if it was to happen, if the equivalent was to happen now, you could potentially ask
Yeah.
6 or 7 people in Dublin who are doing things already. So there's no need for me to continue
Yeah.
in that sense, unless there was something
Yeah.
like the last band was a band called The Last Mile. That was a couple of years ago, and they were looking to play over here. So the best way to get them to do it was just to put it on.
Mm.
But there's a number of, like, there's stuff going on, like there's a lot of interesting stuff happening. A lot revolves around Bowls, bar there in Dalymount. There's a lot of stuff happening there.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's another venue just near there. I think it might be the old Des Kelly Carpets factory up there. So
Right.
there's people putting
Yeah.
on things, and there's people doing stuff. Kind of there's people up in Drogheda doing things as well now. So that's all good. So the last few events that kind of I've been looking to do have been
Mm.
kind of panel events. So we did one actually, where we launched the fanzine just last week. So Aoife
Mm.
O'Leary, who's actually involved with the Hope Collective, but she's a film composer. Stu Daly, who's in a band
Mm.
called Chewy now, and he's released an album.
Mm.
John Brereton, who's in SAC. But you're kind of getting
Yeah,
people
yeah.
and giving them 6 or 7 minutes. You have maybe 5 people on a panel. You play a bit of music in between, and then have another panel where you're talking about how they got
Mm.
interested in music.
Mm.
What I'm trying to do, but time is stopping me from doing this, is recording it and having it there. So that's the document of those people. It's only
Yeah.
a short document, but so we've done other ones. We did one in Liberty Hall, like for launching of the books, and we've done a couple of
Yeah.
launches around. We did one in
Yeah.
Cork as well, and we're going to do one in Drogheda in January. Whereas you get people from the local area and say, well, what made you start? And who were you listening
Mm.
to, or where were you buying your records, or what were you doing
Mm.
politically, or and
Yeah.
just getting that little snippet so that it's there documenting. So that's kind of,
Yeah.
rather than putting gigs on now, that's kind of where we're at.
It's a labor of love.
I suppose it's a labor.
It's a labor. Yeah. Well, all labors are labor. Somebody said nothing good is easy, but I don't like that saying because it's like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Maybe it could be easier.
Yeah, well, it's something that we want to do. Like, if we didn't want to do it, we wouldn't do it. So,
Yeah.
Like, it's not,
Yeah.
you know,
That's
it,
true.
it is, it's what it is. But I do think back to, like, those kind of black and white days in the 80s, and those marches, and where it all
Yeah.
started, and political, like, in a mindset, I haven't changed. I'm still there, and that's how it's difficult to sell a book, because putting monetary value on something is difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I haven't altered in that thinking in those 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's not valid. It's not,
Yeah.
just because you have a price on something, that doesn't make it valid. So.
Out of the gigs that, just like as a wrap up, like what are the gigs that really stand out to you that kind of exemplify Hope as as a collective? And
Yeah, I suppose that there is an obvious one in the Fugazi gig in the SFX, because I remember I was on the stage of the SFX. I had to go on the stage because there was something wrong with a guitar amp or something like that. So I'm on the stage of the SFX, looking
Right.
down. We've sold out the SFX
Mm.
in a gig that, again, this could be a podcast in itself, that 2 days earlier we didn't think was even going to happen in the SFX because of problems with the venue and the ticket that we had
Really?
on sale. Trinity Nth Officer booked the SFX under the guise of the Trinity Centenary, and
Ah.
so the ticket, and it was a benefit then for ACT UP. So a ticket then came out, but the ticket was an information leaflet with a condom in it and an explanation on the dangers of all sorts of things relating to AIDS and preventative actions that you can take to stop yourself, to help yourself from contacting
Yeah.
AIDS.
And we should contextualize this by the year that this occurred, just by the way.
Yeah, so that you couldn't sell condoms in shops, and that the Catholic Church had a stranglehold on the country.
Yeah.
And so the Jesuits ran the SFX.
Yeah.
Mm.
So you were very surprised that they were upset with this. Yeah.
Well, so we were very surprised that they saw the ticket.
Well, fair enough. Yeah.
and so, like, what we were trying to do was, okay, we've got 1,200 people. What's the best thing we can do with 1,200 people? Okay, we'll have it as a benefit. Show solidarity with people who are suffering, try and raise some money, but not really about the money, more about the event, and use the ticket for information for people, because it was a problem in Dublin even at the time, So depending on who you believe, or the version of the story, there was a certain company used to use the SFX an awful lot for gigs, who subsequently bought it and then sold it for whatever, for housing. Um,
Mm.
and we were told that company told the people running the SFX that this gig shouldn't happen. So our gig was 450 benefit gig, this lovely ticket and all, two bands, one from America, one from the UK playing, and their gigs were always 750, and you know, uh, so
Mm.
the person from the SFX rang up Colin and said, we're under pressure for this gig not to happen. We're like, oh,
Mm.
why would you be under pressure? Oh, you run it. So Colin had to get a letter from Trinity's lawyers to say, it would be very unfortunate and blah 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 in whatever the Saint was of Trinity College, that if this gig had to not happen, and we've given an alternative ticket. So we then created an alternative ticket that we brought to the Jesuits, which never actually got anywhere other than the meeting with the Jesuits. Here's the new ticket for the gig, and we had another place lined up through the Dublin event guide. There was this fella called Harry Crosby who had a warehouse. Who had a warehouse down the docks, which subsequently became the Point. And so we had that warehouse potentially ready to use if this gig wasn't going to happen in the SFX. So all that went on for a couple of weeks, and then 2 days before the gig, the Jesuits said, "Yeah, okay, that's the gig can go ahead." And yeah, but standing there on the stage, looking down at 1,200 people. After Chumbawamba had played on stage, Chumbawamba's lead singer, Alice Nutter, dressed as a nun with a bucket full of condoms, throwing them out into the audience, and going,
She was on message.
and kind of going, "Wow, God, we've made this happen." That was nice. But like my defining moment on it, like there's two bands in England, one called Slum Turkeys and one called Crane, and they're not big bands. They're people that I still communicate very regularly with, and they look back with great fondness on their trip to Ireland to play, and it meant an awful lot to them that they got to play in Ireland, and they still talk all about it, and it's more stuff like that, where you kind of go, all right, and you can see it now, like, because we ask so many people to write these stories, and they all say, so many of them say yes, so that's kind of,
So that's kind of a community, really, isn't it?
yeah.
Like you built a community, and it's kind of a widespread one, or at least was there you locked into.
Yeah. There's a bit of, I don't know, respect or something like that, and that's nice. It is nice, that it's looked back with not too many people giving out about it,
Yeah, it's certainly never had that atmosphere of hassle and stuff like that.
Yeah. We did do, and again, another thing, we did do a DIY festival in the City Arts Centre. I think it was about 1995 maybe, and that gig, it was a 2 day event in the City Arts Centre, and we brought over I think we did two of them, one in 95 and one in 96, and Sean Forbes, who was in a band called Wat Tyler, he's now in a band called Hardskin, but he came and he gave a talk on how to release your own record. And he left the number of this pressing plant. They were in the Czech Republic, and I think about 10 bands in Ireland subsequently got their records pressed in that plant. So that's kind of nice. At a time when bands were starting to do their own records, there was a bit of like Mexican Pets and Pet Lamb and Female Hairclays. Bands like that were starting to do stuff, and that's nice to know that, like, who knows? They probably would have found out anyway. you know, but at least there's a direct link to what happened that day, and people
Yeah.
going off and doing stuff. So that's really good. Yeah.
Very cool.
Thanks a million for coming in and talking. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks so much. Sean.
it's
Yeah. There is a line that we throw out all the time, and it's like the motto, you know. It's like if you've got something to complain about, you've got something to change. So it's like, you know,
yeah.
like don't just sit back and complain about stuff and wait for someone else to fix it for you, you know. And you know, that can be anything you do in your life.